What's going on, bibliophiles? Welcome back to Poetry and Prejudice. If you are new here, my name is Barry Ramirez. Welcome to the channel and thank you sincerely for watching. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different, something that I haven't done on this channel before. I'm going to be talking about one way that you can improve the quality of your poetry without reading poetry. And that is through reading fiction works by master prose stylists. I'm going to be giving you guys my top 5 works of fiction that you can read to help improve the quality of your poetry. And with that said, let's crack into it. Before I begin discussing the 5 works of fiction I believe you should read to improve the quality of your poetry, I want to spend a little bit of time discussing why it is that you should read fiction to improve your poetry in the first place. Now, this on the surface might seem like a bizarre recommendation. Why, you might ask, is he recommending that I read fiction and not poetry to improve my poetry? Let me just say from the gate, I'm not saying that. I'm not recommending that you don't read poetry. In fact, the fastest way to improve your own poetry is to actually read copious amounts of high quality poetry. Those will serve as your best models for how to create great poetry. But there comes a point in time when you simply just become kind of bored with the repetition of reading so many poems. That certainly happens to me. And you need to change up what it is that you are reading because your reading has become stale and maybe you're just feeling a little bit uninspired. You need something that's a little bit different. This is, in my opinion, where fiction comes into play. Now, you don't want to just read any fiction writer if you are particularly focused on improving the quality of your poetry. You really want to read the work of master prose stylists. Master prose stylists are writers who have developed a writing style, a prose style that is so beautiful that it's almost like poetry. And so when you read these works, you can almost through osmosis, in the same way that you do when you read great poetry, you can actually improve the own quality of your writing. And this is particularly true for writers or prose stylists, master prose stylists, who have a style that is very, very vivid. And those are some of the works that I want to acquaint you with today if you are not already familiar with them. Now, the first work of fiction I would recommend to you if you want to improve the quality of your poetry, you're seeking some inspiration, is this short story collection here. There we go. Jesus' Son by Dennis Johnson. So this is, as I said, a short story collection. The short stories are not related as far as the characters are concerned. They're all about seemingly different characters, but they are related in terms of theme. Most of the characters in this short story collection are derelicts or criminals. Generally speaking, just people who are lost, drug addicted, etc., which doesn't seem like it would be great inspiration for writing poetry, but the language in which these characters are written about is absolutely fantastic. You are going to have a lot of difficulty encountering prose that reaches the level of sublimity that these prose do. So I just want to give you guys an example from one of my favorite stories in the collection, which is called Car Crash While Hitchhiking, which is about precisely what it sounds like it's about. The author describes a car crash in such vivid and haunting detail. This short story will stick with you for years and years and years. It certainly has not left my mind since I first read it. And if for some reason you can't actually purchase this collection, I believe this particular short story is available online in PDF. If you just type that in on Google, you should be able to find it. But this is towards the end of the story when the person who is hitchhiking is actually at the hospital and he sees the wife of a man who has been killed in the car crash coming down the hall. Now, here is what the narrator says. Down the hall came the wife. She was glorious, burning. She didn't know yet that her husband was dead. We knew. That's what gave her such power over us. The doctor took her into a room with a desk at the end of the hall, and from under the closed door, a slab of brilliance radiated, as if by some stupendous process, Diamonds were being incinerated in there. What a pair of lungs! She shrieked as I imagined an eagle would shriek. It felt wonderful to be alive to hear it. I've gone looking for that feeling everywhere. Okay, so that's just one small instance, and there's prose like that literally throughout this whole particular book. Highly recommend that you guys pick up a copy of Jesus' Son. The second work of fiction that I would recommend to help improve the quality of your poetry would be this book here. So this is the complete works of Isaac Babel, but in particular, I'm referring to a short story collection within his complete works, which is called the Red Calvary Stories. Now, the Red Calvary Stories are actually about the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. And these short stories are very much in the same vein of the short stories in Jesus' Son, in the sense that they are kind of like vignettes of people, and they're not necessarily related in terms of the characters, but they are related in terms of theme. In this case, the violence is what is consistent across most of the stories. Now, this is something that is incredible about this work. It's able to make violence sound as if it is extremely beautiful. And once again, this is something that's just very, very, very haunting. It's going to stick with you. But I want to give you a couple examples here of the kind of writing, the kind of prose that you're going to encounter when you do read the Red Calvary Stories. So this first instance is from a short story in the collection called Crossing the River Zubruck. The narrator says here, "Fields of purple poppies are blossoming around us. A noon breeze is frolicking in the yellowing rye. Virginal buckwheat is standing on the horizon like the wall of a faraway monastery. Silent Volhyana is turning away. Volhyana is leaving, heading into the pearly white fog of the birch groves, creeping through the flowery hillocks, and with weakened arms entangling itself in the underbrush of hops. The orange sun is rolling across the sky like a severed head. Gentle light glimmers in the ravines among the clouds. The banners of the sunset are fluttering above our heads. The stench of yesterday's blood and slaughtered horses drips into the evening chill. The blackened Zubruck roars and twists the foaming knots of its rapids. The bridges are destroyed, and we wade across the river. The majestic moon lies on the waves." So that's just one instance of a beautiful passage, and this is actually just from the first part. It's hard to see there. Work. Okay, it's not going to work. So that's from actually the second paragraph of the first story. It just goes on and on and on like this for nearly 200 pages. You're just going to encounter so much beauty. The third work of fiction I would recommend that you read to improve the quality of your poetry would be Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. Now, if you know anything about this book, you know that the content of the book is grotesque. The book is about a man who falls in love with a young girl and I would say is sexually obsessed by her, which we all know to be morally disgusting. But I will say the way in which the writer captures this love of Humbert for Lolita is sometimes very, very beautiful in its own way. So just to give you an example of the kind of prose that you will encounter when you do read Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, this is an instance where the narrator is describing Lolita herself. "Under my glancing fingertips, I felt the minute hairs bristle ever so slightly along her shins. I lost myself in the pungent but healthy heat, which like summer haze hung about little Hayes. Let her stay, as she strained to chuck the core of her abolished apple into the fender. Her young weight, her shameless innocent shanks and round bottom, sifted in my tense, tortured, surreptitiously laboring lap. And all of a sudden, a mysterious change came over my senses. I entered a plane of being where nothing mattered, save the infusion of joy brewed within my body. What had begun as a delicious distension of my innermost roots became a glowing tingle, which now had reached that state of absolute security, confidence, and reliance not found elsewhere in conscious life. With the deep, hot sweetness thus established and well on its way to the ultimate convulsion, I felt I could slow down in order to prolong the glow. Yeah, that's pretty wild. But that's the kind of thing you're going to encounter when you read Lolita. Again, highly recommend you pick this one up. The fourth book I recommend that you pick up to help improve the quality of your poetry is Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. This is actually a book that I am in the coming days going to do a review of, but the prose style in this book is to die for. It is absolutely incredible. But it basically tells the story of outlaws who are roving the West during the westward expansion of the United States. It's about this group, loosely about this group, I should say, that kind of joins with Mexican forces to get rid of the Apache Indians in the region. And some of the scenes in here are very brutal in terms of their violence, but the way that it's described is it'll stick with you for a very long time. So let me just give you one of my favorite examples from the book here. So this is when a group of Indians are being described. The group of soldiers that are going to root out the Indians are seeing them kind of for the first time, and they look absolutely horrifying, as you'll see here. So the speaker said, "There rose a fabled horde of mounted lancers and archers, bearing shields bedight with bits of broken mirror glass that cast 1,000 unpieced suns against the eyes of their enemies. A legion of horribles, hundreds in number, half naked or clad in costumes Attic or biblical, or wardrobed out of a fevered dream, with the skins of animals and silk finery and pieces of uniform still tracked with the blood of prior owners, coats of slain dragoons, frogged and braided cavalry jackets, one in a stovepipe hat, and one with an umbrella, and one in white stockings and a blood-stained wedding veil, and some in headgear of crane feathers or rawhide helmets that bore the horns of bull or buffalo, and one in a pigeon-tailed coat worn backwards and otherwise naked, and one in the armor of a Spanish conquistador, the breastplate and pauldrons deeply dented with old blows of mace or saber done in another country by men whose very bones were dust, and many with their braids spliced up with their hair of other beasts, until they trailed upon the ground, and their horses' ears and tails worked with bits of brightly colored cloth, and one whose horse's whole head was painted crimson red, and all the horsemen's faces gaudy and grotesque with daubings, like a company of mounted clowns. Death hilarious, all howling in a barbarous tongue, and riding down upon them like a horde from a hell more horrible yet than the brimstone land of Christian reckoning, screeching and yammering, and clothed in smoke like those vaporous beings in regions beyond right, knowing where the eye wanders, and the lip jerks and drools." Oh, that's just absolutely magical description of this motley crew of Indians who are dressed in basically everything that could be conceivably dressed in, it seems like. But yeah, Blood Meridian, Cormac McCarthy, pick it up. The fifth and final work of fiction I would recommend that you read to improve your poetry is Petersburg by Andrei Belai. I actually first learned about this book from Vladimir Nabokov himself. I was looking at a list of his highest ranking works, and I believe that this was number 1 or number 2. And I thought, well, if there's a master prose stylist like Vladimir Nabokov and he prizes highly this particular work, then it must be written very well. And it turns out my logic was correct, because this is written incredibly. But it's basically a story about a son who is going to try to kill his father with a bomb and basically start a revolution in Russia. That's kind of generally what it's about. 700 pages is about more than that, but that's the general idea. And a lot of the language here that's used is just absolutely magical. And I'll go ahead and give you an instance here. So this, I believe, is a moment when Apollon Apollovich, which I believe is the father of the son who is actually trying to kill the father of the son who's trying to kill this particular father. This is a moment before this character is kind of like going off to sleep, and it's just a magical description here. So the narrator says, after these most useful exercises, Apollon Apollovich pulled a blanket over him in order to devote himself to peaceful rest and to embark upon a journey. For sleep, let us add, for our part, is a journey. This evening, Apollon Apollonovich did the same thing, his head wrapped in the blanket, with the exception of the tip of his nose. He was now hanging from his bed, above a timeless void. But here we shall be interrupted and ask, what do you mean, above a void? What about the walls and the floor, and so on and so on? We shall reply. Apollon Apollonovich always saw two spaces, one that was material, the walls of rooms and the walls of carriages, and another which was not exactly spiritual. It too was material. Well, how may one put it? Above Senator Obluhov's head, Senator Obluhov's eyes saw strange currents, highlights, gleams, misty, opalescent dancing spots emerging from whirling centers, clouding in twilight the limits of material space. Space swarmed in space, and all this latter, overshadowing all the rest, disappeared in its turn in an immensity of facilitating, swaying perspectives, which consisted, well, as it were, of Christmas tree tinsel, little stars, sparks, lights. Before he went to sleep, Apollon Apollonovich usually closed his eyes and opened them again, and lo and behold, little lights, misty spots, threads, and stars, like some bright scum on a bubbling, immensely vast darkness, unexpectedly for only a quarter of a second, and suddenly formed into a clear picture of a cross, a polyhedron, a swan, a pyramid filled with light, and then it all flew apart. I don't know about you, but that's just the most magnificent description I've heard of that kind of in-between space between sleep, or in between being awake and falling asleep. All of the different things you kind of see, all the opalescent spots, and kind of like the universe coming apart, if you will. Pick this one up as well. So there you have it, bibliophiles. Those are my 5 works of fiction I believe you should read to improve the quality of your poetry. Also, I recently announced that I published my first collection of poetry. It's a chapbook called Pebbles of Light. So if you would like to support me, to support this channel, then please consider making a purchase of the book in the link in the description down below. That'll take you on over to Amazon. You can buy the Kindle version of the book, which is $10, and download it immediately onto your Kindle or electronic device. Or if you're somebody like me and you prefer to have a physical copy of the book in your hands, then you can purchase the paperback version as well. It's a little bit more, it's $12, but Amazon charges for the cost of printing. But go ahead and head on over there and make a purchase to support me and to support this channel. Otherwise, if you enjoyed this content, hit that like button, smash subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can be informed when I drop more videos on poetry and prejudice. Until next time, guys.